Let me try my ear. Put the earbuds back in. Do you hear the noise again?
No.
Okay, good. Because I like having the earbuds in. Oh, that's right, I unplugged the mouse.
Seems good now.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, fine. I know, because you all get to close at 2 today, right? So we're not gonna carry on beyond the ending of our hour. So welcome everybody, and it's a pleasure to see you again. If you're in the greater New York area, it's really kind of one of those January days where you can long for spring. So I like to jazz it up with a little bit of fun about food. What's new? So the world of seasonings. In history of the globe of human existence, spices have played a huge role. As we use them today, the majority of the world's spices come from Southeast Asia. And from our own history of explorers and conquerors and trade routes, we know that the spice trade really helped to drive the global economy during the Middle Ages, not just across to look for the spices as Columbus went, but also through regions of Africa to pick up more variety of foods. The Silk Road, as I picked this from another reference, was a dangerous and long trade route when going from China to Europe, and sailing helped to speed up the shipment of spices. And as we see, this factor was the route, and that's Route, please forgive me, to India that Christopher Columbus chose to set sail, landing in America. And some linguists say that this is probably where the use of the word Indians for the indigenous people on this continent came from, because it was thought that he had reached India. I'm not that kind of a historian to comment on, any of the intentions or strategies and who was brilliant, who wasn't, but that's a curious kind of theory. So next down is the, oh, that's right, I unplugged my mouse. Let me do this. Please tell me you don't hear that noise.
Okay.
Okay, good. So there we go. What is the difference between a spice and an herb? I'm just making sure I have the right slide. Yes. So a spice refers to any dried part of a plant. Could be the root, could be the seed, could be anything except the leaf. And the reason why the leaves are not considered part of the herbs is that they are part of the spices, rather, is that because they're considered herbs. So when we talk about basil and let's say, why am I tongue-tied? Thyme, those would not be in the spice category. And okay, so but the dried bark, the roots, the berries, the seeds, the twigs, or anything else is all what we call spice. India today is still the world's largest consumer and one of the largest producers and exporters, and therefore one of the leading sources of information about spices on spice research having to do with medicinal properties, the spice research on safety and the care of spices and so on. Now, as I have a few slides that were so elegantly developed by this website called The Spruce Eats, that I've included them, even if they seem to be a bit redundant from the previous slide. They were so beautiful, I couldn't resist. So here again is a simple definition. It's the part of plants used to flavor food. They can be bark or roots or seeds or flowers. Usually throughout history, they have had an important role in both medicine and cuisine as a part of the preservation. Now, the Spruce Eats as a website has some fabulous recipes. I highly recommend it, and I have the the URL in my resources at the end of my slides. Now, when we talk about spices, obviously we put them in our mouths and we taste them. And we learned as kids in school that we had 4 taste perceptions. They were salt, sweet, bitter, and sour. And now we know, and also we used to learn that the bitter was in the back of the mouth, and the salt was in the sides, and the sweet was in the front. Well, it turns out we have sweet receptors all over the mouth. I was reading a physiology textbook that said you can taste without a tongue. That's a rather dark image. I like my tongue in my mouth, even if it's not working greatly. But you have taste buds on the roof of your mouth and inside your cheeks and so on. And the other taste responses that we can get are umami, which is what some people would call savory, or the sort of taste you get when you taste meat. And that seems to be related to something called the glutamate salts, which is related to monosodium glutamate. There's also a metallic taste that one gets, a chalky taste, and probably more, but all the research is being done. In the last decade, at least one Nobel Prize was given for research on the neuroanatomy of taste and smell. So it really still is an active area. Now, when we think of savory and sweet, I want to make sure, what do you think you're doing for flavor? Oops, here we go. And I wanted to keep this kind of open for a moment to say, most of us are salt and pepper guys, right? And maybe hot sauce, maybe ketchup, maybe mustard. But a lot of us are fairly not adventurous with flavor. So let me present you with what I found fascinating things. I even learned some new things myself when preparing for this presentation. So the first spice that I'd like to talk about is nutmeg. It's the seed of the nutmeg tree, which is grown in Indonesia. The nutmeg itself is actually an inner seed, and the mace is another spice that we use less of, but it's certainly available, is a red lace-like outer layer. And both of these can be ground and used in recipes. Most of the time, these will be in something that is considered a sweet recipe. We use them in pumpkin pie, carrot cake, on our eggnog. If anybody has any other use of nutmeg, I'd love to know about it. You do not want to take in as much as a teaspoon of nutmeg because it can cause hallucinations. It is not medicinal. It's just simply, it activates a region of the brain that, while it may not cause permanent damage, it's really nothing to fool with. The nutmeg itself has a fascinating role in history because it's considered a very treasured spice for hundreds of years. And it was in the early ages of the Dutch and other European explorers, a part of a very lucrative trade in Asian goods. And Asian goods included dishes, included tapestries, fabric, but very much the spices. And there were such intense battles between the Dutch and the English traders for control of the different parts of the Asian trade that the Banda Islands, which is where the nutmeg tree grows, got to be a major source of numerous battles across decades that resulted in massacres and imprisonment of indigenous people. And in the end, because the Asian trade was so lucrative, the Dutch created the Dutch East India Company, which was sort of a consolidation of many different partners who sent ships to Asia for goods. And that made them very powerful, and that they created their own currency. They almost acted like an independent country. So they had a lot of control over the Asian trade, leaving very little for others to get in and also probably exploit as well as become enriched. And in the early 1600s, there was a treaty established between England and the Dutch East India Trading Company, in which the Dutch maintained control, exclusive control over, might we remind ourselves, this was a set of islands in which people lived for years, for centuries and generations. But they controlled the island for its nutmeg trees And these were the Banda Islands. And in exchange for saying, we will keep these islands, you can have that new little island on the coast of the New World. And that new little island on the coast of the New World was Manhattan. And we can say, in effect, we are on Manhattan Island today because of nutmeg. Okay, so the next spice that we'll talk about, saffron. I'm not going in any special order, not alphabetical, not by cost, possibly by my own fondness for it. This is the most expensive spice in the world, where 1 pound can go for as little as $500, as much as 5,000. Cultivated in Iran and the lower Apennines in Europe. So these are that mountain range that sort of covers part of Italy, part of part of France. It's the stigma of a crocus plant, which is a cousin of the lily plant. So you see the crocus. Those of us who don't necessarily grow crocus plants for their stigma, pardon me, we love to see them pop up because they are the first flowers to come up after winter. Sometimes peeking through snow and ice, they're beautiful little violet leaves. And then, of course, those stigmas. And the reason why it's so expensive is that those 3 stigmas are harvested manually by whoever is in the labor supply, collected and then dried, carefully dried, and then they are assembled in packages by weight to be sold. For quite a while, there has been good evidence that saffron has a very strong medicinal role, and that it has been shown to boost mood. So that means that it has an effect on neurotransmitters. It may protect the brain and the nervous system because there are inflammatory processes that cause that. And so possibly it has a role in preventing or delaying dementia and other damage to tissue due to oxidation. It's also been shown to help with lowering cholesterol. So while it is very pricey but very healthy, it's something we probably should incorporate a bit more from day to day, even if it's just a little bit of a pinch in tea or a bit of a pinch in rice, as opposed to a big pinch. You can see at the bottom, I've added a URL for a newsletter. I would note that Healthline is an online health information source that provides references for all of the information it quotes, and their writers are medically trained and they have fact checkers. So when I read it on Healthline, I'm more inclined to believe it's valid and not just sort of hysterical claims. Okay, after saffron, we'll talk about cardamom. So I will tell you, I haven't had a lot of cardamom in my growing up and cooking. It's the 3rd most expensive. I'm not sure what the 2nd most expensive is, and that saffron is the number 1. It's a main component when we have chai spice blends. It's described as having a complex, earthy, and bittersweet aroma. May also have the medicinal effect of being a diuretic, which means it increases urine flow, an antioxidant, and antiemetic, as ginger would be, for preventing, just helping with nausea and preventing vomiting. But I have a few more points about cardamom. It can be used in both sweet and savory dishes. Again, every time I looked into a spice, it seemed as though all of them are indigenous to the South Asian regions of the world. So here, widely used in India, Middle Eastern, Arabic, and even Swedish cuisine. So I found that one interesting, how it got up there. But I bought at the Riverdale Y farmer's market on Sunday some of the best bread I've ever had, and it was a cardamom bread from a vendor. Okay.
I am Swedish and we use it in a lot of food.
Ah, okay. I'd like to hear more from you in a minute, because I've only cooked like as a cookie dough and even a dough to make a gingerbread house, and it was fabulous. Yeah, I think I've been missing out all these years. Now it's going to be on my shelf and actively used. So the whole pods, the seeds are ground. It's also found in garam masala. It seasons meat and vegetable dishes, hot beverages, and as I said, this wonderful bread. There are varieties of cardamom, black and green, and also white, which is really the green cardamom that's been bleached. The green, however, is known as true cardamom, and it's the kind most often found in the Nordic and Middle Eastern cuisine. It's the one that's in a couple of different sources calls the top choice. India and Asia often specify whether a green or Asian cardamom is used in a product. So one has to be pretty much a connoisseur of cardamom to be able to distinguish and make a strong preference. The black cardamom has a smoky element, and I am almost quoting directly from a source that makes it more appropriate for savory dishes, while the others might be more for sweet dishes. So moving from cardamom to cinnamon. So the inner bark of several different tree species are how we get cinnamon. The family of trees that cinnamon comes from is the Lauriaceae, and the Lauriaceae family includes cinnamon and cassia, and I'll talk a bit about cassia in a moment. Also, the family from which the bay laurel tree and the bay leaves come from. Also, the family from which the avocado tree derives. So these are an interesting group of cousins. So true cinnamon is defined as Ceylon cinnamon, and this is based on early nomenclature from when Ceylon was the name of the country that we now call Sri Lanka. Four other species are referred to as cassia, and they are mainly produced in China and Indonesia. It's curious that the origin of the word cassia might come from Latin, which has then adapted it from a Hebrew word, which means to strip off bark, a loose translation. And if you see how cinnamon looks, it strips away and it rolls into sort of a tube, which then gives us another name for, whoops, there we go. The Spanish word for cinnamon, canela, and a few other words from the sort of the Latin word tree also comes from the use of the word tube, or the origin, pardon me, a loose evolution of the word tube to canela. Now, cassia is a different plant, but related to cinnamon. In the US, when you buy a jar of ground cinnamon, it could either be true Ceylon cinnamon or it could be cassia. The US does not require that the labeling distinguish one or the other. If one wants true cinnamon, you can get that online or from stores that specifically import it. Some of the cinnamon that we get could be a combination of cassia and true cinnamon. Many chefs suggest that cassia is better for savory dishes and that cinnamon is better for cooked goods. Cassia is also used in pickles and curries. Now, what I would consider a pickle, like a kosher dill pickle, does not have a cinnamon component to it. So these would be sort of the relishes and chutney type things that one would get in foods where the cuisine is from Asia. Once again, because the spruce eats has these lovely images, I decided to borrow it. And here again, noting that it's native to Ceylon, southern India. Ceylon, again, properly should be called Sri Lanka. Made from the inner bark of the cinnamon species of trees, used in both sweet and savory, slightly spicy flavor and aroma, pardon me. Now, each of these illustrations also, and the website, Spruce Seeds, gives advice on how to store your spices. It's invariably a combination of not in bright light, not in a high temperature. So it should be reasonably dark and reasonably cool, because sometimes the components of spicy flavors are in an oil. and it's not in an oil, but there's a little lipid in the seed or seed in the bark or in the root or the twig that the oil is capped, the fragrance and the savory flavor is captured from, and those fats can go rancid. I have to say, if the spice police knocked on my front door, they would take me out, definitely bound and gagged, because I violated all those rules. Okay, so we're going to talk about another spice, anise. And I must admit, I had the impression that all anise was the same. It turns out there's star anise, and then there's anise. So we're going to talk about star anise first. So this comes from a tree native to Vietnam and Southwest China. And this is the Latin name, Illicium verum, Illicium rather, verum. It might even be pronounced Illicum, but I'm not sure. The oil is highly fragrant, used in cooking, perfumery, toothpaste, hair care, skin care products, lots of other grooming products use star anise. In fact, an extract from star anise was part of the process, because when you're making a product, you generally create something and then an enzyme is applied and it's converted to something slightly different. And then that is derived into something slightly different. So it was something from the star anise, which was part of the production of the medicinal product Tamiflu. Tamiflu no longer uses the extract of the star anise. It is the active ingredient is now generated by bacteria. That sounds a little creepy, but actually bacteria are hard workers that never go on strike. And I'm okay with nurses striking. That was not meant to be a sideways comment. But, the bacteria will always do their job if you feed them right. Insulin is made by bacteria and so on. So that's what star anise looks like. Now, there's an interesting character in the Chinese language that is literally translates as 8 horns, which is the name for the star anise. It's one of the things that it's also quite famous for is being part of the biryani and the masala chai. Again, we see it's from the South Asia Indian subcontinent. In Chinese cuisine, as well as in Malay and Indonesian cuisines, it's grown for commercial use, as well as for export and use inside the country. It's one of the ingredients in 5-spice powder. And if one goes to the Spruce Eats website, there's a recipe for making your own 5-spice powder. And in the making of pho, it's the vegetable soup. Yeah, I'm ready with my tea. I got it. It's here. Okay. Now that's star anise. There are other trees that are in the same family. So the Latin name for star anise, I think it was in the previous slide. This is one grown in Japan. It's a similar tree, but the seed pod is highly toxic and hence inedible. In Japan, it may be used instead to burn incense, but there are medical reports of seizures that were experienced by people after using star anise tea because it includes this neurotoxin, anistatin, which causes a severe inflammation of kidneys, of urinary tract, digestive organs, and so on. I want to add the reference that I drew this information from did footnote that the instance in which the seizures were reported might have been related to a sort of a deliberate fraud on the part of an exporter to sell something that looked like one thing was really something different. I pretty much have some trust in the export world that they won't sell poison because it'll turn around and bite them in the fanny. So that isn't something this is not something that should be reaching the market and be confused for the star anise from China. But here in the US, and in fact globally, we can get um, a plant that we can grow in our garden, or I'm sure it's a warm weather plant, so it would need to be something that we could keep indoors in the winter, called swamp star anise. It can be found in growing wild in Florida and other parts of the country, warm parts. A similar tree to the star anise of China, but due to its toxicity, it should not be used for either cooking or folk remedies. And we all know that there are so many products that people say, this is what my grandma used to use for menstrual cramps, or this would be used to induce abortions, or this would be something for digestive disorders. So here's what the plant looks like. Um, this is not related, but there's another plant called the castor plant, which is a beautiful shrub that can be an indoor plant. I see them in bank lobbies. They can also be in warm weather, an outdoor shrub. And the castor plant also creates a seed, which can be very dangerous. It's a source of castor oil. Of course, everyone has heard of that one because it's also one that will help you evacuate from your intestines quickly. But the castor plant is also the source of another toxin called ricin. So let's just say the reason why I've put this here is so that if you know that this is a familiar looking plant, even though it is in the same family as star anise, it should not, the seed pod should not be used for medicinal or culinary purposes. I would grow it. I think it's kind of pretty, but yeah, no, we're not going to pick at it. Now, when it comes to anise, the other one that we do often have that has that interesting licorice types flavor, these seeds are from a flowering plant that's in the same family as cousins and fennel and parsley. By the way, this family of plants, which has a couple of different Latin names, but one of them is umbelliferae, and you can hear the word umbrella in that word. And if you see how when the plant has matured and made a flower, and then when the flowers go away and it sets a seed, this looks like an inverted umbrella. And there are many weeds and many cultivated edibles that are in this family, notably carrots and fennel and parsley. Um, oh gosh, celery, and quite a few others. So this one's been cultivated in Egypt. There's evidence of the hieroglyphs on walls in Egyptian tombs of the use of anise, the licorice-like flavor. And because the star anise is less expensive to produce than the seeds here, most of what we get in the market is star anise. Star anise isn't necessarily anything to distinguish to say it is something to be worried about. It's the fraudulent ones or the mistake to use another plant which has a similar structure. I'm pretty sure I have star anise as well as anise, star anise seeds in my my pantry. When I see these in the springtime in pots where you can buy them and try to grow them, they don't, to me, I've never been successful. They really they're weeds. They want a lot of sun. They're greedy. They want to take up space and sun. And they often just bolt and go to, it gets leggy and dies. So if anyone has a good advice on how to do that, I'm all ears. There's another category of carrot related plants, and that's the plant looks like a carrot from the ground up, the way the carrot leaves grow, only it can grow the size of an adult male. It can be up to 6 feet tall. And if you break the stem, you can actually get a secretion from the seed that can burn your skin. So we won't find that in Van Cortlandt Park or Riverdale Park. It's nothing. It has to grow kind of in really wild places. But I guess I'm saying that these carrot family in general are foods that we've been enjoying and loving and very well nourished by, but they have some mean cousins out there too. Okay, after anise, again, a lovely and very simple depiction of what the plant seeds look like, what their description are, taste and smell, and keep them tightly sealed. And they say up to 6 months. Once again, the spice police would have a good time in my house. Okay, let's talk about allspice. And I want to direct you to the cartoon at the bottom. I sent my husband to the store to buy allspice, and of course he bought all the spices. I think that's something that all of us might do until we feel or advise that it's different. So it is once again a product of the warm weather climate. So it's said to grow in the Greater Antilles. I always thought, why don't you just say the island names? But anyway, Cuba, Hispaniola, which of course is where the Dominican Republic and Haiti are, Jamaica and Puerto Rico, southern Mexico, Central America. Just a sip. And allspice does kind of have the feeling of cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and pepper all had a baby. And that baby was allspice. It's called pimento in other parts of the Caribbean, but you would definitely take a sniff or, dip your finger and taste it, and it's going to taste like a lot of blends of other spices, but it is still quite unique. Very common in Caribbean and Middle Eastern and Latin American cuisines. And this is what it looks like as a seed, and this is what it looks like ground. I have used allspice almost exclusively in making a jerk seasoning, and that it's the major flavor, not to be thought of as exclusive, because jerk seasonings also include lime and lime rind and soy sauce and a number of other things. But it definitely is something that if you're going to make a proper jerk seasoning, you need to have your allspice jar right up front. Okay. And once again, a lovely summary. The berries from the tree in the myrtle family. Sweet and warm aroma used in Caribbean, Middle Eastern, and Latin American. Major seasoning of jerk. Okay, then cloves. As I was reading more about cloves, I was tickled to be reminded that people are usually reminded to take the clove out before serving it, kind of like a bay leaf, because chomping down on that hard, dried flower bud can be kind of unpleasant. So it's the buzz of a clove tree, and for once, the name of the tree is the name of the plant, harvested and dried. Grown once again in South Asia, Indonesia, India, Madagascar. And because of all the different spices that I've mentioned so far, that's kind of what gave rise to the name of those as Spice Islands. The substance in cloves that I think many of us got introduced to was the clove oil that is often used in dentistry, where there is some inflammation around the gum, as a reasonably safe, as everything, it says keep out of reach of children. But it's something that is available. I'm just going to check. I see two things in the chat. It's like, the second most expensive spice is vanilla. Thank you. That's spice and seasoning and flavoring. And yeah, let's get more. So the eugenol. So when you have a jar of cloves and you take a sniff, you might get a little flashback of using eugenol for that. Let's go on. Most of my cloves are ground cloves. All right, so may I once again say these are lovely and I thought they deserve to be shared. Coriander. So I love coriander in a lot of different things. I've used it when I've tried to pretend I'm doing Mexican food. I might say pretend because, it's not as authentic as I wish. The leaves of the plant are called sometimes Chinese parsley or cilantro. And the seeds are what we call coriander. And they can be in an Indian mixture like a garam masala or a curry, where they're heated up and they bloom, or they're ground and they can be added to chili, for example, or a chicken rub. I don't think I've used coriander or the cilantro in anything sweet. So if anybody has, I'd be curious to know how it's worked for you. Okay, coriander, black pepper. So if you're a salt and pepper person, and that's the kind of the extent of your adventuresome adding things to your food, maybe it's a good idea to get some different kinds of black peppers, or the Piper nigrum family. As this shows, it's a flowering vine and it's cultivated for its fruit. And when the fruit is allowed to dry is when it then becomes the seasoning, the spice that we have. They may be simply described as pepper or black pepper, and they're cooked and dried unripe fruit. The green pepper is the dried, I'm so sorry, the cooked and dried, but the green pepper is not cooked. It's just dried, but it's unripe. Or the white pepper, which is the ripe fruit seed. And often I've actually made a few ginger cookies or ginger cake in which white pepper was recommended. And I found it a funny ingredient, thinking, why would I want to do that? It's not going to make it bitter, but in fact it does lend a little warmth and a little punch, a little hint of punch. And it's here again, what's a surprise? Native to India. Okay, the Chinese five spice is interesting. And there's a number of blends. I was going to do garam masala or curry, and I thought I can kind of invite those in another set of slides that are coming. So the Chinese five spice is a combination of star anise, which again, most of the anise that we're going to get in a supermarket in the US is going to be star anise, not the one grown from the plant that's related to carrot, and fennel, Szechuan peppercorn, which is, according to references, not the same as our black pepper, that it's a different species of plant and it's a little sweeter. Also clove and cinnamon. And the five spice history is that it has, like many things that go back for centuries, both a medicinal role. In some cultures, it has that utilize a hot, cold system of understanding medical concerns and managing them. For example, an older person is considered cold, and you would never then give them a food which has the nature of being cold. And the nature of cold does not have to do with the temperature. It could be certainly cold by temperature, but it could be cold by other sort of intrinsic factors. So five spice was part of not only flavor, but also medical management. And I thought I would take a little direction. We could stop for questions, but let's see if we can go to 2 o'clock if questions can fit. I would take a direction to say all the things that we love as we're here in New York came from somewhere else in the world and have reached us through trade routes, through migration patterns in which people brought their favorite foods with them. And we sometimes think of them as, well, this is New England or this is Southern food, but it actually could easily be African food or Indian food or South American food. The tomato, for sure, which is not a seasoning, is indigenous to South America and was taken to Europe by explorers. Excuse me. And initially was thought not to be healthy, and nor was the potato. And then later on, both got to be obviously staples in Europe. Another photo of, or graphic. Okay, I think I'm going to go, I have another photo, a graphic about origin, but it comes a bit later. So when we see where all these different foods have originated, and they are now available very much because of international, the global economy that we have now and the global trade routes. Here are some of the features of most cuisines. So there is a PDF that one of the, I'm sorry, let me start over. I got a piece that was an insert in a Woman's Day magazine some years ago, and I've treasured it and kept it very safe. I took it to the RSS Center yesterday, and there's a PDF made of it. I welcome you to request a copy. And this is what the PDF consists of. It's got 9, make that 7 pictures of the cuisines and the ingredients of different cuisines. And then on the other side, it has recipes on ways to incorporate these different ingredients. So for Mexican, onion, garlic, allspice, cinnamon, chili powder. Now, chili powder is also a blend, which is a combination of coriander and cumin and allspice. So this would be a pre-made, but there are lots of recipes for you to blend your own, as well as the lime and the chilies. Now, noting here, chilies are pretty much indigenous to this part of the world, but found also in India. I'm going to scroll down again. And vinegar. Okay, off to the side. So this one gives advice. As I said, if you request the PDF, it probably will also be available online for you to download for yourself. But I believe Barbara will email it to you. So cooking with garlic, onion, fresh chilies, season with oregano, cumin, allspice, cinnamon, and chilies, sharpen with lime and vinegar, and finish with cilantro. That sounds like a song. Okay. Middle Eastern cooking. Okay, so here we see some similarities. Cloves, cayenne, turmeric, cinnamon, onion, garlic, cumin, lemon juice instead of lime, and mint. You're cooking with the garlic and onion, seasoning with the turmeric, cumin, and cinnamon, and cloves, or cloves. Spice up with ground red pepper, finish with yogurt and lemon juice and fresh mint. Okay. I love the smell of mint, but I'm not too fond of the taste, so I don't put it in my tabbouleh. And I give it away because I love to watch it grow and I love to squeeze the leaves and smell them. Okay, Hungarian. Cooking with onion, garlic, and green bell pepper. We're seeming to start off with the same holy trinity. Season with paprika, caraway seeds, or dill seeds. Similarly, coming from the same botanical family of carrots. And then finishing with white pepper and sour cream or sharpened with vinegar. By the way, if anybody wants to invite me, I'm more than happy to accept your invitation and come taste these wonderful spice blends. I will bring, of course, my signature family carrot cake. Italian. So you're cooking with onion and garlic. What a surprise. Okay. In olive oil, seasoning with basil, oregano, rosemary, and marjoram, or sage. Spice up with crushed red pepper, stir in tomato or wine, bay leaf. I was quite surprised when I read that the bay leaf was in a botanical family similar or a cousin to the avocado plant. And then flavor with Parmesan cheese. Next one. By the way, you can see the crease in the paper as I've saved it and preserved it, but it isn't perfect. Indian, cooked with garlic, ginger root, onion, season with coriander, pepper, and cumin, and turmeric. Spice up with ground red bell pepper, or cayenne. So the red bell pepper is the stuff of paprika. And the cayenne, I believe, are the hotter peppers that are, there is a distinction on which one, and obviously the cayenne is way stronger. Finish with yogurt and or lemon juice and fresh mint. And as I go through these, I want to just kind of say as a sidebar, so much research currently is proving that the herbs have antioxidant properties. The spices have antioxidant and things called polyphenols, and they all have a role in a pathway that can reduce inflammation. And is not to say that anyone from any of these cultures never experiences inflammation, but it's sort of the wandering away from these customary blends of herbs and spices that might explain some of the changes in our health profile. So I think I was on, were we at French or were we still on Indian? Okay, we're at French now. Um, Frankly, this, as I said, was an insert in a Woman's Day magazine. I've never imagined bacon being something uniquely as a part of a French cuisine, but there it is. Okay, wine. Well, that sounds like I could have predicted that. Tarragon, rosemary, thyme, garlic, onion, butter, bay leaves. So last one is the Chinese, and here the five spice would be a part of that blend, as well as the general cooking with garlic, ginger root and scallions and peanut oil, spicing it up with red pepper, in this case cayenne, flavor with hoisin and dark oriental sesame oil and or soy sauce and rice wine vinegar. One of the things that we, as a dietitian, we try to encourage is that your glycemic index, which is the sort of like saying how fast the carbohydrate in a food will go from your mouth to your bloodstream as glucose. And the faster it goes from your dish as you're eating it to your mouth, to your bloodstream, that's called a high glycemic index. And high glycemic index foods are known to be pro-inflammatory. It's not as though you will have a heart attack or some, horrible outcome the same moment, but in general. So curious that so many of the cuisines do include foods which are anti-inflammatory, as though there was sort of an intuitive balance about them. Okay, next slide is more on the origin of different plants, not just spices, but the ingredients of our usual choices. And I'm saying, oh my goodness, the North America looks kind of thin. So I said, let's look closer at the North American food sources. And I guess we came up with, on this continent, pumpkins, strawberries, blueberries. I think those are cranberries, I'm not sure. And I think this is sunflower, not quite sure. And it reminded me of the the indigenous food supply of the people in the North American and South American continent, something called the Three Sisters. So I'm not going to talk about it in great detail because it's something that I'd love for you all to look up. But it basically says if you grow corn and beans and squash together, and that's why the pumpkin or the squash drew my attention, they become a natural, sustainable agricultural system, and that the corn is a good source of carbohydrate and energy, and the corn is a very erect plant, and the beans are an excellent source of fiber and protein and carbohydrate and other vitamins and iron. And the beans will climb up the corn, so the beans get the benefit of more air and more light as they're growing. Meanwhile, down in the soil, the beans will capture nitrogen from the soil and make it available to the corn. So the corn and the beans are the first two sisters. And the third sister is the pumpkin, or squash, as we might call it, because those plants tend to be wanderers. This is not the squash of zucchini. Zucchini squash is a different botanical family, but these squashes, and while they wander.
Hi, excuse me. Would that not be succotash?
Succotash is corn and lima beans. Yes, indeed. That's
Corn and
one of
lima
them.
beans and
Yeah.
some pumpkin or squash.
And some tomato. Yeah, well, I throw tomato in it, but the succotash is the corn and limas.
Yeah.
So there's a few food historians who might question the corn is clearly indigenous to this continent, but I think the limas are might be from Africa. if I had a magnifying glass and felt like taking more time, I probably could find it on here. Yeah, somewhere. Corn is definitely in this continent for thousands of years. So the next slide, I thought would talk about some more of the things that come from different parts of the world. And I thought onions are everywhere. Onions and garlic are, guess what, originated in Middle Asia. So I went back to this one and said, okay, we came up with blueberries and strawberries and cranberries. We did okay on this continent. The Welsh onion is believed to be of Chinese origin, and that it's such a basic food ingredient. So if there's time, I think that's my 41st slide. I'm going to go back to the cover page and ask if there's anybody who would like to contribute your favorite seasonings or your favorite recipe, and or your history of getting adventurous with incorporating new seasonings and new spices into your own cuisine. And thank you for the reference to the sage decreases cholesterol and triglycerides. Sage is wonderful. I've definitely seen that it has. So I'm just gonna fiddle around with that one for a second. So many of the things we attributed to, if you feed these to your subjects and their cholesterol goes down or their triglycerides go down, that's a good outcome, and you say there is a role. Then you want to know what was the actual factor. And sometimes we miss the fact that these things are also feeding the gut bacteria. And the more happy belly, you have a happy body. And so essentially, the more plants of different colors and the less high glycemic index foods you eat, the happier your gut's going to be. And that will have a significant impact, outside of genetic things, on cholesterol. So I think I have read about sage for sure. Definitely safflower. I'm sorry. The stigmas of the crocus plant. I have definitely read about that one. The PDF, I will ask Margie if she's still around to give us an idea of if the PDF. I can show you what it looks like. Spices. Spices starts with the letter S, right? Last time we checked. Okay, here it goes. This is what it looks like. And waiting for it to open. It could happen today or tomorrow. We'll see. But see, what I did for my slides today was essentially crop pictures of it so that each one, but that's what the whole thing looks like. And then there's something on the flip side. And as you see here, it's at least 14 inches by about 12. So it was too big to make an 8.5 by 11 copy. So I'm not sure when the PDF is produced what the dimensions are, but so inspiring because of its content. Any other comments or questions?
I'm interested about that sage, that it helps to reduce triglycerides and cholesterol. I had never heard that. I've been experimenting with the cinnamon to help with the blood sugar and diabetes. And I wonder, I had heard it needs to be the Ceylon form.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. So I'm also keen on knowing that these things are things you can add to your everyday menu, not necessarily not take a statin if it's really, prescribed, but just ways to keep the big protection. I'm not ever going to eat bitter melon to help my blood sugar, because the whole word bitter tells me I'm not going to want that. But so the cinnamon research kind of went into a peak and then a dip as far as how reliable it might be. And partly it was the source of the cinnamon and the way that you would apply it. But I would say it is still considered a contribution to helping keep blood sugar in as ideal a range as possible. And it can be as simple as sprinkling it on your oatmeal or in your coffee or, on anything. I love to put an apple in the microwave and just let it do 2 minutes so that it's cooked, but not my applesauce, and then put a pinch of cinnamon on that. The more, I think there's no reason not to have pinches of cinnamon throughout the day. Not a big teaspoon at once, because that one, like nutmeg, can also cause sort of an irritable belly and some brain thing, which is temporary, but still unpleasant. But the more frequently you can use it, the better. The true cinnamon, again, that it probably is better than the other 4 varieties that are described in my presentation. So if that was something you could get online, I would go right ahead. I would not buy cinnamon pills or cinnamon capsules from a retailer who has them labeled as, the diabetic miracle drug. I think real food cinnamon is as good or better. And we don't know the source because our supplement industry is not regulated. And I wouldn't make a blanket statement that everybody's trying to make a buck at our expense. I wouldn't say that as a blanket statement, but I would say how can we be cautious that we're not getting a product that isn't what it claims to be, or whose potential is not up to what we expect. So I would go ahead and get real cinnamon. I hope no one out there has bought stock in a cinnamon for diabetes company. Let me see what that stuff looks like. So you guys recognize that was the link for today. Cinnamon tablets, and I wrote it wrong. But Google usually forgives me for bad spelling. Okay. So I think these are, I'm not in a hurry. I don't think they can produce any documentation that any of their products made a difference. What they can produce is that research has been done that a certain volume of cinnamon per day helps. How am I doing out there? Oh, here's a funny thing I learned. The cassia, which is the cinnamon that is more common, rolls up like that. But the Ceylon cinnamon rolls up this way. As you see, that rolls inward like a scroll. So if you are buying cinnamon sticks, another not ground, or just regular, that's the way you know the difference. That cinnamon, the other cinnamons, the cassia, roll like so, like a fruit roll up. This one. And why am I looking at the tiny one when the big one is right here? But the others roll inward. Okay. How are we doing? Because I have 2:01 or 2 o'clock.
Thank you so much. It was great, Maudene, as always.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Maudene.
Bye-bye all. Margie and
Bye,
Barbara and
Renee.
Lisa and Julie.
Bye.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Renee. How are you?
How you doing? I'll
Renee?
call you later. I'll call you later.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm saying everyone's name so I can say Susan, goodbye. Have a wonderful weekend. Maya, Liz, Jennifer, Danielle, Bridget,
Thank you.
Margie, and me. Okay, take care.
Have a good
And
holiday.
Jacqueline,
And yes, and Jacqueline, of course.
you
I
forgot
text
me.
her. I just my cursor went up too fast. That's a lousy
Okay.
lousy excuse, but I'm trying it.
That's okay. Have a nice
Okay.
weekend.
Same to
All
you,
right.
love. Okay,
Take care,
bye all.
everybody. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.